Welcome back to the Legal Vixen podcast. I'm trial attorney Karen Kenny, and today we're doing a little different format. I don't have a specific guest, but I do want to follow up on the last guest we had, Leah, who was a client of mine with a success story. If you remember correctly, Leah was charged in a 15-defendant federal fraud conspiracy case based on a business relationship she had with the guy that was really running the business. This podcast is going to focus more for informational purposes. Since Leah had been through that experience, we went through the entire jury trial process as well as the appellate process that had a very successful end for her. So in federal court, especially when you're talking about conspiracy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a fraud conspiracy, it could also be drug trafficking. There's a lot of cases in federal court, a lot in Central District of California, as well as the Southern District of California and San Diego for drug trafficking conspiracies. But generally, for any type of conspiracy case in federal court, it does not take much for the prosecution to stick somebody in that conspiracy, especially if, let's say, a woman has a relationship to one of the males that may be a heavy player in the conspiracy, whether it's fraud or drugs. Relationships can kind of suck these women in to these federal conspiracy cases in federal court, and it's just devastating. So what I want to express is, and this is more tailored towards the women out there, that you need to be aware of certain situations. And I'm not saying men are bad or anything like that, but women are particularly vulnerable when it comes to relationships and getting involved with businesses that you might not necessarily know everything that's going on, or your spouse is having you sign documents, or your name's being put on certain types of documents that are being filed with government agencies. You just have to be careful, because unless you really know what's going on and why you're signing documents, you really shouldn't without knowing and asking those questions. Today, and I'm not trying to, blame women for getting, involved in these types of things. That's not what I'm here to do. I think it's exposing the problems in federal criminal cases, especially conspiracy cases. It's extremely frustrating as a defense attorney when you get a new case, you take on a new case and it's in conspiracy, and the indictments usually have the list of defendants on the first page. They're normally listed in levels of their involvement. So the first named defendant is usually the heavy, and then it goes down from there. Women are generally, not all the time, women are generally towards the bottom of those conspiracy cases. And it's usually, like I said, based on a relationship that they had with most likely another co-defendant that's up the food chain on the indictment. Conspiracy is probably one of the most powerful tools that federal prosecutors have, because like I was saying before, it's so easy to get sucked into a federal conspiracy case when you look at what's required. You think of a federal conspiracy as being like under a big umbrella. And under this big umbrella are all the people in the conspiracy. And the people under this umbrella don't even have to know each other. That's the weird part. I have clients that would say, but I don't know anybody. You don't have to know anybody under the law. So say you're under this umbrella and maybe you know one person, and this one person has you do something for them. Hey, can you mail this check for me? Or, hey, can I use your phone? There could be a lot of other situations where they're asking for a favor, or, hey, do you mind going to drop this off at a friend's house? Something like that. There's drugs inside. You have no idea. If you do one overt act, Just one overt act that's furthering whatever the big purpose of this conspiracy is, whether it's drug trafficking or committing fraud, any type of fraud, like online fraud. There was the COVID fraud that's been big, investment fraud. There's so many different types of fraud, wire fraud, that fall under that umbrella. If you do one overt act in furtherance of whatever the scheme is, you're going to find yourself on that indictment. That's the problem. You could have done nothing else. But the federal government, what they do is these prosecutors will try to find a way to circumstantially argue that, ooh, you knew what you were doing and you agreed to do it. And that's the frustrating part, because circumstantial evidence can be argued obviously both ways. And when you have a woman that is taken advantage of by a man or a family member, it's frustrating because they really were trusting this person that got them sucked into this federal conspiracy. Like we had with Leah, who was our last guest, her situation was this business partner. She had met him from a previous, they worked at a company together. We never really covered that, but they knew each other from a prior employment that they shared in common. And they were really good salespeople. So he decided, like, hey, let's start this business. And then he's putting her on documents. And you heard from her last time that not only did she sign some of them, he forged her name on some. And that actually became evidence in her trial. And he literally got on the stand, took the oath, and told all the jurors that she signed them. And we knew she didn't. It's really frustrating. People think that, witnesses aren't going to come in there and purposely lie. Yes, they are, especially if they have something to gain, like he did. He was getting a cooperation deal, and part of that cooperation was he had to testify during the trial against her. And as she told us, he told her, I'm going to say whatever they want me to say. You should do the same thing, which just is wrong on all levels. So Leah's situation, I felt bad for her because she didn't even realize until we sat down that she had been used. This guy used her, and she trusted him. It was her business partner. She thought she's living life in Colorado. So you need to, if there's anybody out there that this resonates with, and you're like, my boyfriend or my husband or my family members asking me to do such and such, and I better ask questions before I agree to do that, because you do not want to find yourself in the same situation that Leah found herself in. With the relationship issue, there's different scenarios, as I started to talk about, that could pop up. The first one would be like the boyfriend's business, I'll call it. The girlfriend thinks, he's just doing his hustle, and he just does this work, and I don't really know what he does. And then he asks you to do something for him. Hey, take this over to so-and-so's house, or go to the bank and deposit this money in my account. And the girlfriend just does it. And then the next thing you know, like Leah explained, when the feds showed up at her door at 6 a.m. when she's living life in Colorado, and she had no idea. And she was actually lucky, because she said she knew some of the local police that were helping execute that search warrant. And they're like, wait, this woman is great. Like, we all know her. And they didn't go through their normal procedures. Because normally, when the feds show up to either execute a search warrant or an arrest warrant, if they've already done their investigation, they are showing up at your residence at 6 a.m. with a large team of people with guns. If you have kids, they don't care. They have a job to do. They don't care. And it's very traumatizing for the little ones. It's also very frustrating, because when you get into that type of case and there's this woman that's involved, and you realize, oh my gosh, she really didn't know what was going on. This guy used her, and the feds file a conspiracy charge against her because she did one overt act that helped. And now she's, fighting for her life. Like you heard from Leah, she was looking at 40 years of potential prison time, which is huge. In regards to the other type of relationship that gets involved with this type of scenario with fraud is when a husband has like bank accounts and then he starts putting stuff in his wife's name that we talked a little bit about. Leah's situation was different because it was a business partner, but I've personally represented people, because I've been doing this for so long, that didn't realize, you're putting your name on an account in a financial institution, which is a U.S. bank. You are signing documents, you are giving your ID, and your name is on there as the account holder. They presume you're the one that's controlling the account or has access to the account, can move money around, write checks. That's a problem if your husband is doing everything, but your name is on everything. You're going to get charged. If you can't go into court and say, I had no idea what was going on. Because like I said, it doesn't matter if you didn't know everything that was involved in the conspiracy. If you agreed to do one overt act and it furthered that, and they're going to try to circumstantially argue that, oh, she agreed to be a part of this, they'll try anything to prove that you were in agreement with all, at least with one other person in the conspiracy to commit a crime. It's not that hard, especially when we're talking about federal charges. They have to go to they don't have to, but eventually they have to go to a grand jury to get an indictment. That's usually how the federal cases start, is with a grand jury indictment. There's other ways that they start. It doesn't always have to go to a grand jury if the person's pleading guilty, they knew the charges were coming. So there's other issues that will make the grand jury process not an actual requirement. But most cases, there's a grand jury involved in that. And what the grand jury has to be convinced of is, was a crime committed? Is the person we're looking at possibly the person that committed the crime? It's a probable cause standard. Probable cause is so low in the criminal justice system. It's not like the burden of proof that is required to convict somebody during a jury trial. That is the highest burden in the legal system, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. So when we're in a trial and the person was indicted based on probable cause, they're maintaining their innocence. I'm not guilty. I want to go to trial. The jury then is brought in, obviously after jury selection. They have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that all of the elements of whatever charge they're being charged with was proven by the prosecutor. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. I know in movies and TV programs, sometimes you hear beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, in the legal system, there's no such thing as beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's confusing. The jury instruction for federal court, the definition is different than the one they use in, say, California state courts. The way I argue it to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt is if you have doubt that's based on reason, that's not good enough. The burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's higher than that. And then you have to argue, the circumstances and the evidence. And the problem, I think, with the jury system here in not only the federal system, but the state system as well is, unfortunately, we do have the best system. There's a lot of countries that don't have the same system that we have here. So it is the best type of system, a jury of your peers. But jury selection is so brief. the judge will call in a panel of jurors. Say in a criminal case, because I do both criminal and civil jury trials. In a criminal case, say you get like 60 jurors that show up for jury service. And we have to question them and try to get as much information out of each juror as we possibly can in a very small, limited amount of time. A lot of judges will limit the amount of time that each side can question the jurors. So it's not like we can sit down with these individual jurors and interview them in length and try to figure out, okay, one, who's telling me the truth? Because, people lie in jury service all the time. Like they're trying to get out of it, or there's some people that are just too a little eager to be on the jury, and you're like, that's odd. So it's hard to take that small amount of time and try to figure out of all these jurors that answered for jury service and actually went to court, because a lot of people don't, try to figure out who are the best jurors, because most people are so, I don't know if predisposed is the right word to use, but they're very, I guess, jaded, because we're all a product of our experiences. And although we do have the presumption of innocence, people are supposed to be cloaked in innocence until the prosecution proves otherwise beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not how the brain normally works. We're judgmental. We live in a judgmental society. And it's hard for jurors, I think, to realize that they need to take all those biases and junk they have and their judgmental stuff and stick it out the door, because they have to try to be impartial and not prejudge people. Well, what do you do as soon as you see somebody? You're going to prejudge them by the way they look. You're going to prejudge them by the way they talk. And a lot of people, when you're sitting in a criminal case, the judge is going to read the charges. This is always my favorite part. I turn around and watch the jurors, the big jury pool, as the judge is reading the charges, just to see facial expressions once the judge tells everyone what the person's charged with. Depending on the nature of those charges, you can get a variety of reactions. That's very telling, because I'm sitting there taking notes, not trying to act like I'm taking notes, but I'm like, okay, that person really is like stunned by what my client's being accused of. And those are the people that you need to be careful of. And depending on who gets put in the box for further questioning, you don't have much time. You have to figure out who's going to be the most fair to my client. And especially on a fraud case, people hate fraud. Most people have been victims of identity theft, especially nowadays. You get all these jurors that get kicked off for cause because they're just so predisposed and judgmental because they've been victimized themselves. So back to what I'm saying is it's really hard when you're representing, like, say, a woman that's involved in something that we're sitting in a trial with other people, other men who were really running the show. And the jurors are looking at your client. Like Leah explained, she felt like she wasn't treated as an individual by the jury. I would agree. It was horrible. I think she was originally convicted because of, what the optics looked like. All of us lawyers and the defendants, most of them were men, were just all sitting on that one side together. And then the prosecution gets to sit by the jury, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think that's unfair. I want to sit by the jury, but I'm not allowed to. So I don't know. It's just there's so much that goes into, working a case up, especially if you have a female that you truly believe did not do anything wrong. It's just an uphill battle. So women need to protect themselves, especially if you find yourself, or maybe you have a friend. You might have a girlfriend that you are really close to, and you guys are out at happy hour or just taking a stroll wherever you go for your walks, and she starts telling you a situation with her boyfriend or her husband, and you're like, that doesn't sound right. Like, Did you ask questions? Well, he just told me I could just sign it and it wasn't a big deal. No, that's a red flag. And you need to tell your friend that's a red flag. And hopefully she doesn't go back to her boyfriend or her husband and go, well, I talked to so-and-so and she told me this. No, don't do that. You need to keep that within your friendship and just do your due diligence, because you do not want to see yourself sitting in federal court on a fraud case or a drug conspiracy case or whatever it may be. Those are the two most common types of conspiracies. So moving on from that, I think women tend to get involved with these types of conspiracy situations with men who either use control tactics or fear tactics, but mostly it's what I would frame as emotional manipulation. And if you've ever experienced people or men that can be manipulating, it's, making you feel bad or making you feel like, oh, there's nothing, what are you talking about? Like, you're crazy. Like, no, this is fine. And they're very manipulative with the way that they talk to you, and then they talk you into doing something that you don't realize you shouldn't be doing. One of the scenarios that I really want to stress in federal land or federal court is a theory of liability that doesn't even exist in the California state court. So federal court has a theory of liability called willful blindness. What that means is, if you should have known, or if there were circumstances where a reasonable person would have thought, that seems like a red flag. Like, I didn't ask questions and I don't want to know. Like, it's okay. I don't want to know. I'm just not going to ask. I'm just going to do what this person's asking me to do and not ask questions. Guess what? You can still be found guilty in federal court because you were purposely being willfully blind when there were red flags everywhere and you should have been asking questions and you didn't. That's a theory of liability that a lot of people don't even realize it exists, and how easy it is for the prosecutors to argue, look at this little circumstance, look what she did here, look what she did here. And they're like putting all this together. These are all red flags and she should have known better and she just willfully didn't want to ask any questions. You're going to find yourself convicted in that situation. So you really need to pay attention to those red flags. In a relationship, if you're asked, to sign or do something that you feel, this doesn't feel right, trust your gut. Women's instinct is really good. You need to trust yourself. It pains me to think back on the number of women, and there's other clients that I've had similar to Leah. Thankfully, those other clients, we were able to fight for them. One case in particular with my investigator, Kristen, who you guys all met in a previous episode. We had a client that was doing stuff for her boss, and she didn't realize it, and she got charged with fraud. This was in state court. And we fought for her and did an incredible investigation, and we got her case dropped. So we didn't have to go through the same process that Leah had to go through in federal court. There's another scenario where it's family loyalty. So there's times where, say, an older dad will ask his adult daughter or adult son, hey, I need you to do this for me. Well, of course you're going to do whatever your parents ask you to do if you love your parents. But there's situations where there could be some illegal activity going on that you don't realize, and you need to ask questions. What am I doing? What is this for? Because you don't want to get dragged into it. It's horrible because, especially with the family situations, when criminal charges go down, it just rips the family apart, and it's really sad. Why are women so vulnerable? Because we're sitting here focusing on women and how they get, sucked into these situations that turn criminal. Women are emotional, and we're nurturing and we're trusting. And men are different. We all know that. They're different than us. And a lot of times that can be taken advantage of. Especially, I'm sure there's women out there watching where you're thinking, yeah, I have a friend that comes to mind. She's very much too trusting, and there's probably this stuff going on that she needs to ask questions about. Well, you need to sit down and have a talk with that friend, because you don't want to have to go visiting her behind bars if she ends up mixed in a criminal case with a bunch of other people. Another reason is women are financially dependent on men, so they'll tend to do things if they're asked if that man is supporting them, because they need to stay in the relationship to survive financially, because for whatever reason they're not working, or they have, kids with this person, and they are just there to make him happy and don't ask questions. I had another case with a female, and this wasn't a family situation. It was a federal case out of San Diego, where my client worked at a club in LA, and the pandemic was starting, and she was going to lose her job as a dancer. She knew this guy that come in all the time, and he offered her a job to be his executive assistant. She wasn't educated. She was very pretty, but she was not educated, and she needed the money, and she agreed to be his assistant. Turns out he was having her go to different banks to deliver and deposit large amounts of cash and open bank accounts. And like I said, she was not smart. She really thought this guy was just this big businessman. Turns out he's money laundering drug proceeds to the tunes of, she was involved with $11 million. The prosecutor, I meet her and I'm thinking, there's no way they think she's the mastermind. Like, no way. I meet with the prosecutor in court, and he gave me this offer that was ridiculous. She's the mastermind. And I told him, I'm like, I know this is going to sound funny because there's so much money, and she went to all these banks. You have to meet her. You have to talk to her. You'll understand exactly what I'm saying. He agreed to do that. After that, he realized she was not well educated. This guy took total advantage of her. And even though the amount of that fraud or money laundering was $11 million, she got probation. Probation. She had 2 little kids. She was able to stay out of custody. So there's things people can do in federal court, especially women, if you really are taken advantage of. Some prosecutors are more willing to help you out than others, unfortunately. But this particular prosecutor did. So I just want to make sure women out there understand the red flags that they need to be aware of, and ask the questions. Don't be afraid. If you need to consult an attorney. That's a privileged conversation that you can have, just for your own peace of mind. The red flags would be putting accounts in your name, somebody putting accounts in your name, and you're like, okay. Signing documents you don't understand. I've had this, I don't know how many times, where my female clients had their husband just sign documents. She had no idea what she was signing, and then she gets pulled into a criminal case. Letting someone use your email or your phone, that could drag you into this too. Receiving or moving money temporarily. This has become a lot more common in the last few years. Don't do it because you don't know the source of that money. And if it's being laundered and you're agreeing to do this and you're not asking the questions, you're going to get charged with conspiracy. Being told, oh, don't worry about it, that should be a huge red flag. Being asked to lie about something, oh, just once, it's okay, just this once. Don't, tell them this and everything will go away and it'll be fine. Another red flag. Or if you find yourself feeling fearful, but you're staying silent because you're so scared, that's a red flag. Like I said, you have to trust your gut. And you need to talk to somebody, and you should probably contact a lawyer. If you can feel confused or pressured or kept in the dark about things, that's not protection. You need to protect yourself and realize that, especially in federal court, the stakes are so high, and the amount of time somebody can do in prison it's not like county court where people are getting slapped on the hand here in California for certain types of offenses. It's big time, and there's a lot of prison time attached when people plead guilty or take the risk and go to trial. If you find yourself in the situation and an investigator comes up to you, I just want to stress, do not talk to law enforcement officers. If you are being asked about a situation that you've been involved with your husband, with your boyfriend, with a business partner, they may tell you, oh, you're not under arrest. We're just trying to get information. The more you tell us, it will help you. Please don't believe that. They're not there to be your friend. You need to have the advice of a lawyer. Tell them politely, I don't want to talk to you unless I have a lawyer present. They lawfully cannot keep asking you questions. That is the most important advice that I can give you. So hopefully this helps somebody out there. And like I said, this is informational only. It's not for any type of specific legal advice because I'm just talking in general terms. I just want to make people aware, especially women, that you need to protect yourself. Thanks. Until next time.